Me and a buddy chose some national forest in Oregon specifically for how remote it was. About a year prior, a family became lost and the father was never found, although the mother and the child lived to tell the tale. Anyway, we set up camp around 4 p.m. after getting pretty deep into the woods on a mountain accessed by logging roads, maybe about 100 to 200 yards from where we parked near a lake. Without much else to do, we started a fire and cracked some beers as the sun went down. Then, pickup trucks started going through the woods, slowing down when they saw our campfire. We got curious and stupid because of the beers, and went deeper into the woods. Seemed like hell of a party was going on. Then we stumbled into a clearing where maybe 15 to 20 dudes were hanging around a bonfire next to a mossy rundown camper trailer. One had a pistol on his hip, another was just chilling with a shotgun. We were like, oh shit, at first, but someone approaches us and acts neighborly and invites us to have a beer, so it seemed okay. They were joking around mostly, some talking about drugs, but there were some older dudes that seemed pretty tense. As this happened, 45 dudes who seemed to be standing sentry at the camper, which didn't look like it had been moved in a long time, went inside for a few minutes. When they came back out, they said we were and saw us making out. Pretty quickly I got up to head back to our site, but my slower, drunker buddy took a few punches. Then he made it out and started following, and we were sprinting through the forest in the darkness, just hoping to get back to our site by spotting the glowing embers of our burnt-out fire, the whole time with gun-toters in tow. We found our site with pretty much everything in the tent. We pulled the stakes to toss it in the trunk of our car, when we hear an enraged scream only about 50 yards from us. Kill them. So we were like, fuck it, dropped the tent and gear without even saying a word to each other and sprinted in the direction of a car. We peeled out and thought we were good, but about 30 seconds later, some headlights come up from behind us and I'm like, fuck, that's the truck that shotgun dude was chilling at. So now we're being pursued by crazy gun-toting rednecks with a superior vehicle in an unfamiliar forest on unmaintained logging roads in the dark. And the only thing we can do is speed up. I remember looking at the speedometer as we approached a washed out hairpin turn. It was moving from 45 to 50 miles per hour, and the truck was trailing us pretty close, like by only a couple feet. And I was pretty sure that we were going to slide off the cliff and die. Somehow, my drunk ass buddy managed to power slide that turn and get some distance between us and the tweakers. And we eventually made it to a paved 2-lane, at which point the truck pulled off. We put it together later that the camper was a meth lab. Nothing else it could have been. Deep in the forest with armed guards and shit, but yeah, resulted in a drunken high-speed night chase on unfamiliar logging roads, and we nearly slid off the side of a mountain. To preface this story, let me tell you guys that I've had guns held on me, been in car wrecks, got stuck out in the mountains with a dislocated knee in winter, and this story is easily the most frightened I've ever been, which is weird because I didn't have any real reason to be scared. Deep woods, Vermont, maybe 11 at night. I'm in my hammock, just sort of chilling. I'm reading by a headlamp when I hear a noise. I kill my lamp and listen, and it sounds like something moving around maybe 100 yards away. I squeeze my eyes shut. I have pretty good night eyes, but I'd just been reading so I couldn't see much, and just listened. Didn't hear anything else, but I was uneasy. I slid out of my hammock and snuck over. There's a large flat rock with 2 stumps on either side, like chairs. Laid out on the rock was a dinner for one, plate, flatware, a big ass sandwich, and a dark brown bottle. I was confused and a little creeped out, but not unduly scared. I reached out for the bottle, not to drink it, just out of curiosity, and when I picked it up, it was ice cold. This was at the middle of the summer, and there's no way I'd been sitting out for more than 20 minutes. As soon as I realized that, I got a horrible ripple down my spine, and the feelings of eyes on the back of my neck. I put the bottle down real slow and put my hand on my pistol. I always tend to carry a .45 in the woods. I looked around and didn't see anything, but it still felt like somebody was eyeballing me. I walked back to camp and my head was spinning like a top. I was ready to fucking piss myself. I made it back to camp, but I still had that feeling. If anything, it was worse. It reminded me of all the times I had to go down into my grandpa's basement as a kid. and walked past a stuffed deer head. That feeling of terror and the knowledge that if I ran, it was going to get me. It was just like that. I was scared out of my mind, but by the time I got back to camp, I was sure that if I ran, something was going to pounce out of the trees. I left all my shit and walked maybe another 20 yards through the trees to get to one of the craggy mini cliffs you get out there. White knuckling my pistol as those shivers rippled from the back of my neck to my spine. Every horror movie I've ever seen, every scary story I've ever told, it was all bouncing around my head. I put my back to the rock and I fucking just stayed there. I had that feeling of being watched by something that had no love for me until about 3 in the morning when the sun came up. I packed my shit and booked it. Didn't go back to the table, just got my gear and hoofed it out as quick as I could. I had to sleep another night in the woods before I was out, and while I didn't feel anything, I still hardly slept a wink. Now, I'm fairly certain there was some kind of explanation for the food, and I'm sure the feeling I got was me scaring myself. I've always had an active imagination for that sort of thing. That said, while I still love to camp in the Green Mountain State, I haven't been within 50 miles of that spot again, and I still have nightmares of it sometimes. This happened while I was backpacking in the Goat Rocks Wilderness in Washington State. My friend and I were trying to get up into a certain basin above the tree line, and we got a really late start thanks to road construction, so we were really hoofing it up the trail trying to make a camp before dark. My friend hikes way faster than I do, so he got way out ahead of me, and by the time I got to where I detoured from the main trail up, an informal boot path would take us into the basin. He was nowhere to be seen. So, there being no campsites near where I stopped, I backtracked for about 3/4 of a mile to a lake where there were established campsites right along the trail. After maybe an hour, my friend shows up having realized his mistake. This is well after dark, and we settled in not really knowing our surroundings. It was a fairly large open area though, likely a horse camp area because the trail is popular with horsebackers, but we encountered none. Set up our tent, both one person, ate, and went to bed. Neither of us actually sleep well when we're backpacking, but for whatever reason, he was out cold and I was sort of lucid at best for quite a while, just listening to the sounds of nature and trying not to psych myself out about the possible demons and monsters and man-eating beasts lurking in the woods every time I heard a twig snap or a pine cone fire from a tree. So maybe 3 hours or so after I went to bed, this would have been maybe 1 a.m., I start hearing a very distinct sound of really heavy footsteps around my camp area, maybe as much as 100 feet away. I didn't really think to analyze the patterns of the footsteps made at the time, but I remember it sounding distinctly bipedal. You can usually pick out a deer or mountain goat because they don't plant their feet in pairs. Other than these occasional footsteps, it's basically silent. No crickets or rustling of bushes or anything. That silence was instantly shattered by the most terrifying sound I have ever heard in my life. It was basically the same intensity as a whistle on a steam train, but much, much deeper and more demonic-like. Almost like a cross between a cow mooing and a lion's roar, but loud enough that it echoed off the mountains on the opposite side of the valley. Immediately after this noise, this creature went hauling ass off into the woods, crashing through the bushes. The forest I could see when I set up the camp was basically covered in head-high huckleberry shrubs, but remained running around in earshot for at least 2 minutes, running back and forth and sometimes getting distinctly closer, and sometimes getting further away. All this time it sounded like it was a creature with 2 legs running around. This whole time my heart was doing about 200 beats per minute and I was sure I was going to be eaten by a chupacabra or something. After a couple minutes the footsteps faded and it fell silent again, and never heard anything else. I probably lay awake for at least another hour before I finally asleep. My friend didn't hear a damn thing. In the morning when I woke up, I looked around and there was a wide open area that led down to a small beach at the nearby lake to see if there was any evidence of what the noise was. Turns out there were fresh elk prints in the mud near the lake. Maybe 20-30 feet away was a large print of either a cougar or a bear, I don't remember which. So, likely something was stalking one of the elk that wandered near my camp and spooked it in the middle of the night and caused it to spaz the fuck out. At least that's what I hope it was. A few years ago, I was hiking somewhere on the border of Montana and Idaho. The exact location escapes me at the moment. I was with my uncle, and the hike was something like 6 miles in, 6 miles out from the TH to a lake. Keep in mind, this is a very remote area. To even get to the TH was about a 20 to 30 mile drive in on dirt logging roads, and there were no other cars at the TH, and we didn't see anyone on the trail the entire day. On the hike in, we noticed a makeshift camp set along the trail to our right. This was by no means a designated camping area, it just happened to be enough of a clearing to pitch a tent and have a smaller area to walk around in. The camp looked somewhat disheveled, and there was nobody in immediate sight. We continued on to the lake, ate lunch, and headed home sometime later in the afternoon. On our way back, the camp was now to our left, and now that we were headed in the opposite direction, the camp came into view much sooner along the trail than it did on our hike in. It was a few minutes until we actually reached this camp. I had a very eerie feeling now. From this direction, I could see now that the tent flap was unzipped entirely. I found this strange and scanned the camp for its residents. By the time we reached the camp, nobody had appeared, and I decided to yell out to anyone who may be in the camp. Maybe say hello, maybe to see if anybody needed any help. I just had a strange feeling that something was wrong here. At this point, my uncle was very much freaked out and was trying to continue walking along without incident. I yelled out 3 or 4 times towards the camp, and each time walking closer and closer to the tent. I got no response. I stood a few feet away from the tent and scanned around the hills, and there's nobody in sight. The camp looked exactly the same as it did on our hike in. Upon further inspection, I could see a few items strewn about the grounds beyond the tent. My first stop was definitely going to be the tent. I thought for a few seconds and pondered exactly what I may find in the tent. I was scared of waking someone, but more scared of finding someone who may not be able to wake up. I crept closer, my uncle reluctantly following about 10 paces behind. I yelled a few more times, no answer. I pushed aside the flap, and there's nothing but a sleeping bag laid out perfectly as if someone had just unrolled it. Keep in mind, this is a very nice tent, perfectly assembled too. Nice vestibule, spacious and sturdy. It struck me as odd that someone with such a nice tent would have just been so foolish to have left their tent unzipped. So I stood and scanned again. This tent was a few hundred feet away from a very small water source. There were various items, as I said earlier, every 50 feet or so. I noticed a Ziploc bag on the top of a boulder right next to the stream. I headed over there and found that it contained several strips of uncooked bacon. Again, strange. My thoughts were racing, and I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I put the bacon back where I found it and looked around again. Nobody was here. We hadn't seen anybody all day, and this camp looked exactly the same as it did in the morning. Who in their right mind would leave a bag of bacon just sitting right here? Who would even bring bacon into a place like this, and how? There was no ice chest, not even a car at the TH. Why would you bring food like that into an area where there are mountain lions as well as bears? There wasn't even a stove or any cooking utensils in sight. This was a very barren camp. My thoughts began to slow down, and I looked to my feet. I saw several shell casings and several rounds to a 45 caliber handgun. This was the icing on the what the fuck cake. My uncle insisted we leave immediately, and at this point, I agreed. We hiked rather quickly out. Counting paces, I calculated that the makeshift camp was about 1 mile from the TH. I still have no idea what could have happened at that camp. It still freaks me out, but it makes for a very good story.
In this little shop of horrors, that's how we get down. Yeah, enter, the projects on the prairie, scary. Greet you at the gate with Bloody Marys. Blood, a rail full of blood. Back to the cemetery, get more blood. Standing on the grave, drinking blood, smoking bones. We seen a crew of ghouls running by with stolen tombstones. With Hell's Angels on the chase, they lost a bust of black skull. Want you embrace, they tie you up in chains and they stomp on your face. They go to purgatory and they beat the fucking case. I look around, mad bodies being buried in